Hey everyone. For the next couple of tutorials, I'm going to be drawing from the same still life or collection of objects using similar techniques, slightly different, but really for the same reason. These are exercises that will help us learn how to see better, to perceive edges and contours. And remember what a contour is. So a contour is basically a line that describes all of the edges of a form that help describe that form without using any shading. So it's not just the outer perimeter or the outline of objects, it's also any interior edges and lines. And so in both of these exercises, I'm going to be seeking out all of those contours, trying my best to see them very well, and try to coordinate my hand with my eye. Now, the first exercise we're going to do is called blind contour drawing, and in the resources section on the last module of Canvas, I did post a article from a writer, I believe from New York Times Magazine from 2015. His name is Sam Anderson, and if you haven't read it yet, I totally recommend it. It's short, but it's pretty funny, and basically he talks about how he had always drawn his whole life, and he thought he was a really good drawer, but over time he started to get tired of his style. Like he says that about his style, it was cutesy and severely limited. This is quote, and after several decades, excruciatingly boring, I had lost the ability to surprise myself. My visual relationship to the world had atrophied. Occasionally there were minor coups. A 4-year-old would ask me to draw a pirate ship or a dinosaur, then tell me I was the world's greatest artist. Eventually, however, they would grow up and change their minds. So he goes on where he's with a friend who's an artist and telling him about his problem with drawing, and his friend tells him about this process of drawing where you are not looking at the paper as you draw. And at first he says this was really silly. Like he says, quote, "This seemed absurd at first. I had never heard such a thing, but I followed his advice. I drew my iPhone without looking," meaning not looking at the paper. He was looking at the iPhone. Without looking, and when I did finally look down, I couldn't believe the results. It looked horrible. It looked like a broken toboggan. It was as if someone else had drawn it. A cataract patient, high on peyote. I loved it. For the first time in my adult life, I was genuinely surprised by something I had drawn. And so he goes on, talks about all the different things he draws using this same technique or exercise, and he grows to really find it interesting to do, and at times he's even surprised by the results. So at the end he says, "It turns out on close examination, the world is gloriously strange. Things are lumpier and hairier than we have been led to believe. Planes are never flat, colors are never solid. Matthew McConaughey's hairline is not the platonic ideal you might imagine. It is jagged and wandering, like a map of the coastline of a distant, mysterious continent." So yeah, he goes on where these are just things that he never noticed before because he never took the time to really slow down and really look. And so that's what this first exercise is about. So this is the still life that I set up, and I'm looking at it from the viewpoint that I'm showing here. And I have it set up on my table, kind of raised a little bit. I am standing over my paper, and I'm going to use a 4B woodless graphite pencil, and I'm going to start at any point on the still life. And the thing is that once I start drawing, I'm not allowed to lift the pencil and I'm not allowed to look at the drawing. So I'm looking away, just looking at the still life. So the still life is to the side a little bit. And I'm going to start in the middle. I could start anywhere on the still life. I would just make sure that where I start, so if I was starting up high on the still life, or in the upper part of the still life, I would, like the tiki mug here, I would start up here. But I'm going to kind of start in the middle where this ladle is and where this little bowl is. So I'm just going to, again, just arbitrarily start anywhere. And my goal is to link my eye and my hand. So wherever my eye is, the tip of my drawing pencil is. And it doesn't matter really the path that I'm taking. Like the path that I'm taking may be any path, and it may change. If I did this a second time, I may take a different path. So now I'm just going down this green little vase. And I'm trying my best to just really look at the contours. And again, what I mean by a contour is not just the outline. So now I'm at this yellow plastic thing. I have no idea what it is. And it's definitely mostly outline, but there are some interior lines here that I can describe. And if I ever feel like my eye or my hand is kind of going too fast, then I can slow down a little bit. And it's okay to repeat the same lines. So you may need to do that in order to get to the next part that you need to draw. Is just go ahead and repeat the same contours that you already drew. And it's probably not going to be in the same spot that you drew it the first time, but that's totally fine. Because the goal here isn't to create a perfect rendition. It's just to try to make it so that it seems like your eye and your hand are coordinated. So it's kind of like synchronized swimmers. Synchronizing your eye and your hand. Going back up this bottle again. Then I'm going to try to describe the Totoro. And I'm just trying to seek out all the subtle shifts in the contours of Totoro. And I may even describe like the edge of the basket that it's on. It went off the page, that's okay. So now I'm at where the handle of the ladle is, so maybe I'll try describing that a little bit. So I'm at the back of the head of Totoro here. And sometimes there can be subtle contours that you may not necessarily be able to see as clearly as others. So like his ear, Totoro's ear, I see multiple planes. So I'm kind of describing some of those edges of those planes just to give him some dimension. And I'm sure that many of these lines are exaggerated. I'm going to go ahead and make his nose black because that's where his nose are. He's got some whiskers, 1, 2, 3. There we go. I'm back at the ladle here. Let me see if I can get his eye. And now I'm going to see if I can get some of the tiki mug. So again, this is where there might be some very subtle contours, just edges where there's different planes that make up the tiki mug. Like there's some slightly curved lines, some straight lines. I wanted to try to get this other little jar here that's overlapping the edge of the basket that it's resting on. And the ladle is resting on the tip of it, or the top of it. And again, here's another subtle contour that I might want to try to describe. And then there's probably tons of other contours that I missed, but I think I feel pretty good about, I'm not even looking at the page yet, but I feel pretty good about a lot of the different ones that I captured. So now I'll look at the page and see what I get. Okay, so now that I'm looking at it, I want to just kind of look back at the still life and look at the drawing and see if I recognize some parts. Like this is obviously the opening of the tiki mug. Here's, I think, the nose here, the brow, the back end of the tiki mug. This is that top of the jar. This is, I guess, the ladle here, the spoon of the ladle. This is that jar. This is the other green jar, but so is this. I think this is where I started. No, this is the eye, that's right. That's the eye of, and the nose of Mr. Totoro. There's his whiskers, his head, his ears here. This was the handle of the ladle. This is the Totoro's tail. And this was part of that green thing. And oh yeah, and here's the yellow thing. So it's great. I can, even though it's not exactly, obviously, but I can still see things like the angle of the overall yellow thing is pretty accurate. The placement of the eye to the nose looks pretty accurate. The overall dimension of the tiki mug, the fact that it is higher than where Totoro is, and stuff like that. So placement wise, it's kind of cool. And what's also cool about this is you can go back into it, and I may just treat it as sort of like an abstraction now and just try to make it just more interesting, maybe bring out some of the forms, make them dimensional. So it's a cool way of making an abstract drawing or painting, is starting with this process of blind drawing. So you don't have to do this, but I just find it fun to do sometimes. Like that's a really neat thing happening here. So maybe I'll highlight it by darkening part of it or something. All right. So again, yeah, you don't have to do this necessarily, but it's just fun to kind of, like I say, play with it after you've done the exercise. So I would definitely do many of these. Again, the goal is to connect your eye and your hand, feel that connection. There are times when you won't feel very connected, and there are times when you'll look at the drawing like, what is that? You won't be able to recognize stuff. But it's neat when you can recognize at least parts of of the form that you're drawing. All right, so have fun.